I have to tell you a story about New Year's Eve. Normally, we spend New Year's Eve with friends or with family, and this year we wanted to do something different. Walt and I, just the two of us. My idea of that was to spend an intimate evening with 500 or so of my closest friends at the Gatsby Gala downtown, and I wanted to dance. Walt wanted something that was a little bit more truly intimate. So we compromised. We went to the Improv on Granville Island, because all of us love a laugh, and they're great. And then we went to a late seating for dinner, also on Granville Island. And the plan was that we would then, after that, go to the Edgewater Casino, because they had an outdoor venue with dancing, and they were going to have fireworks at midnight. So, great compromise. I was going to get my dancing and my joy of fireworks and being part of the crowd, and he was going to get his wish for an intimate dinner with the two of us. Great plan. You know where this is going. It didn't work out that way. Our waiter, Seth, I think his name was a science student at UBC. And Walt, of course, loves science, loves the stars, and so they ended up starting to chat about astronomy and the importance of science and the future of astronomy and science and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to interrupt this because it was a lovely discussion and he was a lovely man. But now all of a sudden, it's 11:45 p.m., okay? So out we go. Because it's late, we run down to the waterfront at Granville Island because we know we're never going to get to the casino. But did anybody know that False Creek bends? You can't see Science World in that area from Granville Island. So, okay, you go there, and all you can see is the lights from across the way and this promise of something around the corner. So we figured, okay, if we can walk to the end of Granville Island, it's a little further to the east, we might be able to see the fireworks from there. The result, we rang in New Year, listening to the screaming and hollering and all that stuff from the people downtown, while we were walking in a laneway in front of the Emily Carr Institute. So much for romance. We laughed about it. I mean, it really was funny. We got to the end of the island, we did our kissy and all that stuff, and saw the reflections of the fireworks in the distance because you still can't see the Edgewater Casino area from there. One thing is absolutely for sure, and that is I will never forget this New Year's experience. So the following day I was telling my sister Jill about how anticlimactic this was. It was actually a really lovely evening. It was wonderful experience in so many ways, and yet there was just this tiny little edge of me that didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. And Jill's response was brilliant. She said, "It's because you were attached to an expectation. If you had no expectations, if you didn't have a certain picture in your mind of how you wanted it to be, it would have been a wonderful evening. You would have had no feeling of disappointment."
It was perfect for me.
All right. So I pondered that, But I thought it was so clever how much we attach our joy and our sense of whether or not something is successful to that picture, that expectation that we have. Buddhists say attachment is the root of all suffering. And I wonder about that too for a while. I'm attached, obviously, to my husband, to my son, to my family. Do I have to be unattached to them to be happier? Is that what they mean? No, I don't think so. What they mean is that when we just depend on circumstances or people outside of ourselves for our sense of well-being, that is the attachment that we need to let go of. Attachment is that expectation, that needing to be in control, that picture that needs to be met in order for our picture of well-being to be complete. Letting go of those expectations then frees us to live in this now moment rather than remaining in the prison of resentment and anger and dis-ease of things that happened in the past. The prison of argument and competition in our relationships, and the fear and worry about things that may happen in the future. The Dalai Lama said, and I quote, "Most of our troubles are due to our passionate desire for and attachment to things that we misapprehend as enduring entities." End quote. Big words. Misapprehend as enduring entities, and our passionate desire for and attachment to them. People spend entire lifetimes working on non-attachment. We're not going to solve it today. And, as always, I need to remind you of this disclaimer. Everything that I say today is because I need to learn it. Consider it a buffet. Take what makes sense to you and what appeals to you and leave the rest behind. I won't be hurt. I have no attachment to that. So, on to some thoughts about attachment and letting go. Perhaps the most familiar attachment, one we can all identify with, is an attachment to the past. An excerpt from that great author and lover of love, Leo Buscaglia. "If you're like me, you may forget your own telephone number, but have an unfailing memory for past mistakes you've made. We compound this when we allow these memories to cloud the present, even years after they've occurred. There are parents, for instance, who burden themselves with a lifetime of guilt for the mistakes that they feel they made in bringing up their children. There are those who have made poor life decisions in work, in social and personal situations, and have pounded their chests raw with contrition. Continuing to punish ourselves so far out of proportion to the wrongs we may have done is an intriguing phenomenon. It suggests that we are our own harshest judge and chief tormentor. At one time or another, we will all need the forgiveness of others, but equally important is the forgiveness we owe to ourselves. Isn't it time to liberate ourselves from our own self-imposed cells of guilt and regret? Love is not about opening old wounds, it is about healing them. It is about getting up and moving forward and getting on with life." End quote. That's it, we can all go home. I mean, he just said it everything. Here's the thing. We can't change the past, no matter how much we wish we had done or said something differently, no matter how much we were hurt by our childhood experiences, no matter how much someone has done us wrong in the past, no matter how much we don't want to accept a new reality. Nothing's going to change it. Torturing ourselves because of something that is over is not logical, and yet we do it all the time. Sometimes it is hard to let go of the death of a loved one, the loss of a relationship, being passed over for a promotion. When we finally accept and we get past the letting go, sometimes even then it's difficult because it's hard to trust again. It's hard to open ourselves up and be willing to allow ourselves to feel that pain that might happen again. So we tend to shut ourselves off. Shutting ourselves off is like stepping on a garden hose that's running. It stops the flow of good. It does not serve us. We limit our access to good. Mary Manon Morrissey says, and I quote, "Even though you may want to move forward in your life, you may have one foot on the brake. In order to be free, we must learn how to let go, release the hurt, release the fear, and refuse to entertain your own old pain. The energy it takes to hold on to the past is holding you back from a new life." End quote. So how do we do this? How do we let go of the past and make room for new, the new greatness and goodness that is ours? First, I think you've got to acknowledge what you're feeling. You've got to actually bring it to the fore. So many of us have pushed our feelings down that we don't even know that we have them. That movie from Frozen, Let It Go. Has anybody seen that movie? It's a lovely Disney movie. My 26-year-old son texted me and said, "You've got to go see this movie, Frozen." I couldn't believe it. He was, 26. Anyway, he and I went to go see Frozen. In that song, one of the characters sings a song called Let It Go. And in there, she basically runs away, frees herself from all the burdens that she had, and makes herself new. The way she does it is the first step is that she starts to feel alive again because she feels the feelings and she lets them go. And that's the song. And I'm sure it's going to be an Academy Award winner. I don't know if it got nominated, but it should. It did? Number 1 on the charts, and it's really quite lovely. Anyway, do spend the time to feel the feelings that you have, process them, express them, write them down. You don't need to do anything other than take that piece of paper and throw it away. That's why we have Burning Bull Sundays. Just get them out. Then consider the other F word, forgiveness. Forgiveness is nothing more than releasing the negative energy that you're holding about something. It doesn't condone what the other person did to you. It doesn't require the other person's participation. It doesn't mean that what they did is okay. It doesn't mean that you're going to forget what they did, even. Forgiveness simply says, I didn't like it, but I'm not going to carry it anymore. And it releases that pain. And don't forget, sometimes the person who is most difficult to forgive is yourself. In his series, The Keys to the Kingdom, David Owen Ritz describes why we need to be willing to let go of our resentments with these words, and I quote, "When you resent the past, you keep it alive as unhealed energy within yourself. Holding on to resentment in this way is like taking poison and expecting somebody else to die. You never really repay the other party for the harm that they caused you by holding on to your feelings, as you might think. In the end, you only succeed in harming yourself more, because the energy of resentment is polluting your own life. Ask yourself, is holding on to this thought serving me well? If it no longer serves you, consider releasing it, creating a vacuum that can be filled with new good." End quote. Again, we could all just get up and go. Great quote. When you forgive and let go of the past, you can find the lesson that may have been in that incident. But you can choose to leave the pain of the story behind. It frees you from driving your life with one eye in the rear view mirror or one foot on the brake. Choose to put that past away and allow yourself to live more fully now. Another attachment, and it's a variation of this attachment to the past, is the attachment to the familiar. Sometimes that devil we know is more comforting than the devil we don't. But it could be an angel. One of the most interesting healings that Jesus carried out is told in John chapter 5. The story of the healing at the pool at Bethesda. In the porticos, the entranceways, lay invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. And I quote, "One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to be made well?' The sick man answered him, 'Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me.' Jesus said to him, 'Stand up, take your mat, and walk.' At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk." End quote. Now there are a few interesting things to note about this story. The first is that Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" It's kind of an uncomfortable question. And the man doesn't actually answer the question. Instead, he complains. He goes into, "There's no one to help me. And if I do start moving there, someone else gets there before me." Straight into victim mode. Why? Because that's what he knew. That's what he was used to. And we all know that sometimes it feels good to be the victim. I don't know what that is, but it is true that sometimes it is comforting to be the one wallowing in suffering. It feels juicy somehow. Am I the only one who sometimes gets like that? There's some joy in that. No? So, first question, do you want to be healed? And then, unlike so many of his other healings, Jesus doesn't even lay hands on the man. He just says, "Get up, take your mat, and walk." And at once the man was made well. What's the message there for us? All it took was the decision. The power is ours. All it takes is for us to see that we can choose differently and take up our mat and walk. We have the power. When you release the attachment to sticking with only what you know, with only what's familiar, you allow yourself to open up to infinite possibility. Now we get into some more juicy stuff. What about attachment to other people? So often we pin our happiness to others and how they behave. So often we have a picture of how things should be in our relationships. And so often that picture is so perfect, a la Disney, that it is bound to be disappointing. Sometimes we hold people to some pretty high standards, our relationships to some pretty high standards, and then we try to control how they show up. It's hard to let theirs be theirs and ours be ours, especially if they're people we care about, if they're our child, our spouse, our parents, our siblings. We can be so attached to our idea of what is right, or sometimes we can see that things could be better for somebody else if only they ... or they should ... we can be so attached to all that good that we see because we care so much, horribly insistent that they do things our way because we care so much, that we forget that it may not be what they want. That's not love. That's control. It's manipulation. And it is in these times that we need to remember that their lives are theirs to live, not ours. John Lennon and Paul McCartney wrote some brilliant music. And the song, She's Leaving Home, speaks to this point beautifully. It's the story of a girl who's had enough of her parents' loving control, and she leaves. I'm going to try and read it, and part of it is what she's doing, and part of it is the echo of what they're thinking to themselves. So bear with me, and hopefully it'll make some sense. Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock, as the day begins, silently closing her bedroom door, leaving the note that she hoped would say more, she goes downstairs to the kitchen, clutching her handkerchief. Quietly turning the back door key, stepping outside, she is free. She, we gave her most of our lives, is leaving, sacrificed most of our lives, home. We gave her everything money could buy. She's leaving home after living alone for so many years. Father snores as his wife gets into her dressing gown, picks up the letter that's lying there, standing at the top of the stairs. She breaks down and cries to her husband, "Daddy, our baby's gone. Why would she treat us so thoughtlessly? How could she do this to me?" She, we never thought of ourselves, is leaving. Never a thought for ourselves. Home. We struggled hard all our lives to get by. She's leaving home after living alone for so many years. And then it ends. She, what did we do that was wrong? Is having, we didn't know it was wrong, fun. Fun is the one thing that money can't buy. Something inside that was always denied for so many years. She's leaving home. Bye-bye. Cool song. Actually, with songs, in some ways it's more powerful to hear the words without the music, because then you really get the words. So, if you want more peace, release your attachment to control of others, even if you think it's for their own good. Observe, in the words of Loretta LaRoche, who is a really fun comedian, observe how often you shit on somebody. Love is letting the other person be who they are, relating to them for who they are, and not for how they make us feel. Speaking of attachment to others, we also get attached to what others think of us, don't we? A colleague at work recently experienced some pain because he overheard someone saying something that was disparaging about him. And he came to me and asked me, because I'd worked there a million years, and of course he's young, so he thinks I'm ancient. He asked me what he should do about it. And I reminded him of what I believe is some of the most challenging words of wisdom that are out there, and that is, what someone thinks of me is none of my business. It's in the times when we are most challenged that we are called to respond with love to the people around us, knowing the truth about ourselves and not feeling the need to show them that they're wrong. That's not to say that we shouldn't endure abuse, because obviously that's not true at all. But when we observe behaviors that we don't like, we need to respect their boundaries and ours, be clear about what is ours to do and what is theirs. Try to remember, what others think of me is none of my business. Another attachment that causes us suffering, the attachment to a circumstance or an outcome. Sometimes that picture in your head won't match up with the way things turn out, just like New Year's Eve didn't for me. You may pin your sense of contentment on all kinds of outside circumstances, whether you get the promotion, if the parking lot at the grocery store is packed and you can't get a space, if the traffic on your commute was heavy. You may complain about the lousy weather while you were on vacation in Mexico, or the quality of the service at the restaurant that you had the fortune to eat at last night. None of it really matters. We just think it does. In experiences, remember that events are neutral. The meanings we attach with our thoughts give our experiences power. You get more of what you focus on, good or bad. Sometimes I think the world will rise to your level of expectation, no matter how low. Shakespeare had it right. Hamlet. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So in a nutshell, negative thoughts, negative life experiences. Positive thoughts, positive life experiences. And one of the best ways to lighten up on your attachment to your own right way is to develop an attitude of gratitude. As you're complaining about the lousy weather on your vacation in Mexico, are you remembering to be grateful that you're on vacation in Mexico? Yeah. As you're complaining about your commute, do you remember to be grateful that you have a car, that you have a job? Can you choose to take that situation of a traffic jam and turn it around? No better place, other than the shower, to crank up the radio and sing along. Or maybe go hands-free and call someone that you haven't spoken to for a while and let them know you're thinking about them. Listen to an inspirational podcast. Take that rainy vacation afternoon. Have a snooze.
In the car? While you're driving.
Yeah, put it on cruise control.
There's another joke about that, but I won't tell you. I'm reminded of Joseph. You know Joseph, he had the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. The guy's life was a roller coaster of ups and downs. He was his dad's favorite. His brothers got jealous, they sold him into slavery. He rose to be the leader of the household slaves. The household master's wife thought he was pretty cute. Into jail he went. I don't know if he actually did anything, I don't know if it says. But he was sent to jail anyway for fooling around with his master's wife. While he was in jail, he made himself useful by interpreting people's dreams. One of those prisoners was subsequently released into Pharaoh's service. Pharaoh was having bad dreams. Up goes Joseph. By the interpretation of his dreams, he becomes second only to Pharaoh in the running of Egypt. And at the end of it all, he is reunited with his family. And he says, what man intended for harm, God intended for good. He wasn't attached to the outcome. He knew it would be good. Instead, he chose to accept. And in acceptance, rather than control and judgment, lies peace and joy. Accept this now moment for what it is. Enjoy today. Seize the day. Or as my friend Loretta LaRoche says, squeeze the day. Finally, most importantly, when we hold on to judgments, when we define ourselves by our stuff, by our relationships, by our possessions, our roles, by anything out there, we're attaching to impermanent markers. They are bound to change. And when they change, we open ourselves up for pain. This is going to sound kind of perverse, but non-attachment is unity. Non-attachment is unity. Attachment implies two parts, the attacher, the attachee. I'm sure that's not a word. But we are one. Whenever we insist on seeing something out there instead of already part of us, we separate ourselves. And therein lies judgment, worry, and the need to control. We could call that hell. When we remember that each of us are expressions of the divine, we're all connected. There is no need for attachment. We're there already. Jesus said, "For what you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. The kingdom of heaven is at hand." The kingdom of heaven is a life of joy, of wonder, of love. It is available to each of us right here, right now. All we have to do is choose to pick up our mat and walk. God bless you.